1980 was the first great year for the Williams Formula One team when they secured both their first Drivers' Championship and Constructors' Championship. After securing second place in the 1979 championship, Williams shot to first following Ferrari's unexpected downfall. Contesting the championship with the FW07 and FW07B chassis, the latter of which is represented here in F1 2013, drivers Alan Jones and Carlos Reutemann scored 6 race wins and 12 other podium finishes between them. This feat was remarkable, considering the fact that the team had only technically existed for about 3 full seasons. The FW07 chassis will go down as one of Williams' most successful early cars. The same cannot be said of the FW12 chassis of 1988. Following the loss of the Honda engine deal to McLaren, Williams decided to more or less write off the 1988 season, following the announcement of the engine rule changes from the turbocharged formula to naturally aspirated formula. 1988 was instead a year of learning for Williams, where they would learn to grasp how the naturally aspirated engines would perform compared to the turbocharged Honda engines they'd been used to. Powered by a Judd V8 engine, the FW12 was horrendously slow and incredibly unreliable, and drivers Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese could only show for themselves a best finish of 2nd and 4th respectively. By 1992, however, things were looking a lot better for Williams. In 1989, the team negotiated a contract for Renault engines, a deal that would prove incredibly fruitful for the team. Following years of experimentation, the active suspension that Williams had been trialling since 1988 came into full effect here on the FW14B, a car that was initially meant to be an interim chassis before being replaced by the first variant of the FW15. However, the FW14B was so good that it was instead maintained for the entire season. Eventual champion Nigel Mansell would score an incredible 9 wins that season, and every race that he finished in either 1st or 2nd, a true show of the pace the car had. FW18 is the car that Williams used during the 1996 Formula 1 season, its most statistically dominant season in the sport. Drivers Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve scored 12 wins between them out of a maximum of 16. Hill never finishing a race lower than 5th place, whilst Villeneuve finished outside of the points only twice. However, despite the inherent pace of this car and its two drivers, this would be Williams' last dominant car. Designed by Adrian Newey, he had a falling out with Sir Frank Williams during the 1996 season. His input had already largely designed the FW19 for 1997, after which his input was no more. This was Williams' swan song. Following 3 winless seasons and a new engine partnership with BMW, 2003 proved to be Williams' first attempt at contending for a title since 1997. The BMW Williams FW25, driven by Juan Pablo Montoya and Ralf Schumacher, was the car that they used for that whole 16-race season. Montoya put up a strong title challenge, winning 2 races and getting a string of podiums towards the end of the season. Ralf Schumacher also scored 2 wins, giving the team their best finish in the Constructors' Championship since 1997, finishing second with 144 points. This was the most successful car the team produced under the BMW partnership. Unfortunately, the relationship faltered after 2 mediocre seasons, and the relationship ended in 2005. Williams' 2010 challenger, the FW32, was just another mediocre offering from the team during their lackluster years under Cosworth and Toyota power. After Toyota pulled out of F1 at the end of 2009, Williams was forced to return to Cosworth power, and it was just another mediocre car. They only finished 6th in the World Constructors' Championship. Even its strong driver lineup of Rubens Barrichello and Nico Hülkenberg was not enough to elevate this car any further up the order, despite Hülkenberg's surprise pole position at the Brazilian Grand Prix. It was a fairly forgettable year in Williams' history, but it wasn't the worst. 2011 was the worst in Williams' history until that point. The worst, at least since their first, in 1978. They only finished 9th in the standings, with only 3 points finishes and 5 points to their name. It may have had an attractive pseudo-Rothmans livery, but unfortunately looking good is no substitute for going fast, and fast this car was not. It could only manage 2 9th place finishes from Rubens Barrichello at the Monaco and Canadian Grand Prix, and a single 10th place finish from Pastor Maldonado at the Belgian Grand Prix. Suffice to say, this car was dog shit. After 2 disappointing years with Cosworth power, Williams returned to Renault power for the 2012 season, and the FW34, driven by Pastor Maldonado and Bruno Senna. The car was an odd one. At times the car was a midfielder, at others it was a backmarker, and at one race in particular, the Spanish Grand Prix, it actually managed to win. The most recent win in Williams' history. That victory scored by Pastor Maldonado was only his 2nd scoring of points that season, and he would then proceed to go on a 9-race streak of not scoring. In fact, he only managed 5 points finishes that year. Coupled with Senna's smattering of lower place finishes throughout the year, the team only managed to finish 8th in the Constructors that year. Really not impressive for what was, at one point, a race-winning car. Compared to the 2013 FW35, however, the FW34 was a rocket ship. The FW35 was incredibly inconsistent and just outright bad. Maldonado even called it undrivable. Seriously, Maldonado, a man notorious for his crashing abilities, called this car undrivable. His teammate Valtteri Bottas managed to qualify an impressive 3rd place at the Canadian Grand Prix, but could only show for his efforts a 14th place finish, going to show just how poor the car was. In fact, it wouldn't be until the penultimate round in Austin that Bottas would score his first and only points of the season. Just like in 2011, the team only scored 5 points for 9th in the Constructors' Championship. 2014 was a massive turn of fortune for the team, swapping out their Renault engines for Mercedes and adopting a new low-drag philosophy. They kind of lucked out, as the two things went hand in hand with each other, as they created what was effectively the second fastest car on the track. Driven by veteran Felipe Massa and Valtteri Bottas in only his second year in the sport, the team might have been a bit more successful had it had a bit more consistency. Massa's pole position in Austria could not be converted into a win, which kind of went to show that he wasn't the same driver he was back in 2008. Needless to say, it was a welcome turn of fortunes for the team that had regularly been scoring non-points finishes, and the team finished a welcome third place in the Constructors' Championship. In 2015 was kind of a repeat for the Williams team. In 2014 the Ferrari team had not been up to the pace, and in 2015 it was the Red Bull team instead, allowing Williams to finish third place in the Constructors twice in a row. However, whilst the FW36 had managed 9 podium finishes, including 2 second place finishes, the FW37 could only manage 4 third place finishes instead. The car did still manage to show how competitive it was, managing to lead 1-2 in Great Britain for the first few laps of the race at least, until the Mercedes, dominating Mercedes, came along and overtook them. Despite finishing third in the Constructors' Championship, however, this was the first showing of chinks in the Williams armour, as other teams were starting to get a bit more competitive. Those chinks in the armour turned into full-blown cracks in 2016, the FW38 proving nowhere near as competitive as its 2 Mercedes-powered predecessors. Despite a strong-ish start to the season and a third-place finish in Canada, Massa and Bottas could not provide the same level of results as the previous 2 cars. Other teams were getting more competitive. Red Bull returned to the top 3, and Force India was starting to catch up as well, using the same Mercedes power plant. Williams ran in 4th in the Constructors for most of the year, but in the final few races, Force India overtook them, and the FW38 could only finish 5th with 138 points. And things were only going to continue going downhill. The new regulations of 2017 was Williams' chance to prove they could still build good cars. Unfortunately, they could not. The FW40 was just the latest in a long line of Williams that was lackluster at best. After Valtteri Bottas was poached by Mercedes, they replaced him with Lance Stroll, or rather, Lance Stroll was signed and they replaced Bottas with Massa, who was meant to retire at the end of 2016. Aside from an unexpected podium in Azerbaijan, the car could never finish above 6th place, and it only got worse as the season went on. One of the most notable performances of the car was its failure to get out of Q1 at the Austrian Grand Prix. The team finished 5th in the Constructors once again, but this time with only 83 points to show for it. The 2018 FW41 was built with input from Paddy Lowe, a man who had come straight from Mercedes and had experience designing race-winning cars. The FW41 was anything but, however. What had been a gradual decline for the team became a sudden drop in 2018. The team that had regularly been scoring points in 2017 was suddenly not scoring points, and they only managed 3 points finishes the entire season, once in Azerbaijan and 2 in Monza. It was the team's worst season since 2013, only scoring 7 points the entire year and coming stone dead last, 10th in the Constructors' Championship. If 2018 was an unmitigated failure, then 2019 was an unmitigated disaster for Williams. Despite being designed by Paddy Lowe, the FW42 was one of the worst cars the sport has ever seen. Even in qualifying trim, the car was typically 2 seconds off of the pole pace, and the two Williams regularly made up the final row of the grid. The car wasn't even ready in time for testing, only arriving 2 days late. Paddy Lowe refused to take responsibility for the car's poor performance, and he subsequently resigned from his position. The car only managed 1 point the entire season, and that was only after the 2 Alfa Romeos were disqualified in the German Grand Prix, giving Robert Kubica 10th place. This was Williams' all-time low. Surely it could not get any worse. Compared to the FW42, the FW43 was a marked improvement, but it wasn't enough. The car could not manage to finish in the points at all, despite being on the verge a few times. Unfortunately, driver mistakes ended up denying Williams any points in the 2020 season for the first time in their history. It also marked the first time since 2015 that a team has not scored at all in a season. It was also, unfortunately, the final season under the tutelage of Sir Frank Williams and his daughter Claire, the family being forced to sell the team to Dorilton Capital as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite finishing last in the championship for the third year in a row, there was a great deal of promise this year. The FW43 was an improvement over the FW42, and with the investment from Dorilton, hopefully the team will start its long hike back up the rankings to start winning races once again.